Hi guys, it's Talha here again today. So today what we are going to discuss finally is going to be about functional English. So we had two classes of functional English today, in which we discussed about direct and indirect speech, and then after that we discussed some of the fundamentals of story writing, where the teacher explains some of the basic and the most important concepts of story writing. So we have first, in the earlier videos I have discussed what is direct and indirect speech. Just to recall, in directs, one is direct and one is indirect. So in direct speech, you have to repeat the exact words of the speaker, and you have to include and enclose those words inside the inverted commas. So this is where you repeat the exact words. That is known as the direct speech. And in the indirect speech, you do not have to repeat the exact words of the speaker. You can add, remove, or do certain stuff with the sentence, just to convey the idea of the speaker in your own words. So when you convey the idea of the speaker in your own words, that will be counted as your indirect speech. So that was direct and indirect speech. I have uh, I have explained this in previous videos with many examples, so you guys can check that out as well. But today we are going to be discussing about the negative. One is affirmative or declarative sentences. I did many examples of these sentences, which are the positive or just the normal statements which you use. Affirmative, you can also call it declarative, which do not negate, or which are just which is just normal simple statements. But then there comes your negative sentences, where you have a negation. For example, I say that Talha said, and also I'm using said because direct and indirect speech is mostly about your past tense. So that's why I'm not using says, I am using said. So here I'm going to include a comma, then I'm going to start the my quotation marks or the inverted commas. I'm going to write don't touch it. Don't touch it. For example, this sentence, Talha said don't touch it. So this is, now how do you convert it into, this is direct speech, this is reporting speech, and this is reported speech. The reporting verb is in the past tense, so we've got to change this as well. So you have in indirect speech, what you're going to do, you're going to write Talha said that. Talha said that. Also, in some sentences, that, the word that is an exception. So you have to think logically, you have to think by yourself whether it's appropriate to use this word that or not. So that you have that so that you have to think by yourself whether it's appropriate or no. So you have Talha said that. uh, so that is an exception. Talha said that not Talha said that or if I don't think that using that here is appropriate. You have to say Talha said not to touch it, not to touch it. So this is how you can convert a negative sentence into indirect speech. So I'm not going to use do not. Talha said do not touch it, because that will be the exact words of the speaker. There's no point of converting that into indirect when you're just repeating the same thing. So what I did instead, I said Talha said not to touch it. So I think this makes more sense than and you don't have to use that here, because I don't think that's appropriate to use the word that inside this sentence. So you have negative, then you have interrogative. I don't think we have discussed interrogative in the previous lectures, and also I've discussed many examples in the previous lecture succinctly in detail, so you guys can check that. So you guys can check out those videos as well. So you have interrogative sentences. For example, again I say Talha. I'm using Talha because that's my name. So Talha said, uh, where are you going? Where are you going? And of course, I'm going to place a question mark after uh, where are you going? And so here, how are you going to change this? And also in the interrogative sentence, you have to change this direct speech into indirect speech in such a way that this question gets replaced by an affirmative, by a declarative statement. So it's not going to be a question anymore. It's going to be a simple statement rather than being a question. We'll see that in a sec. So you have Talha said that uh, where Talha said that where. If I say where are you going, so that will be a question. But if I say where Talha said where are you, so there is you, so you can either use he or she or it, or I'm just going to use he. So Talha said where Talha said where he was going, or where she was. I'm using was because the verb of the reporting speech is in the past tense, so that is why the tense of your reported speech is also going to change. So you have Talha said that where he was going, or where she was going. We don't know what is you representing, or where are you going, or where you or I am also confused that, okay, is it going to be like this, where you were going, because there is no subject over here, so we don't know what is this you referring to. Where are you going, where you were going, or where he she. So you can also use you can also use he she with it. So that's not, there's no restriction in this. So this, and you're also going to omit this question mark, because this is not a question anymore. This is just an affirmative statement, so that is why you're not going to use the question mark again. Next, we have exclamatory sentences. So exclamatory sentences, exclamatory sentences are sentences which express an emotion, a sudden emotion, a sudden feeling in a sentence. When we these statements also embellish your writing piece, and they also add emotions to your sentence. And at the end of an exclamatory sentence, you put an exclamation mark, which identifies that this sentence is an exclamatory sentence. For example, okay, I'm not going to use the law. For example, if I say that Majid Majid said Majid said uh, Majid said, and you have certain reserved words for your exclamatory sentences. So, for example, if I say that Majid said alas. So alas is a reserved word for your exclamatory sentences. So I say that Majid said alas. Uh, Alas, I failed the exam. So here this alas is representing, or this alas word, reserved word, is identifying that this sentence is an exclamatory sentence, because it's a reserved word, and it's using an exclamation mark after this word. Or you can also put this exclamation mark. You can either put this here, or you can also put this exclamation mark over here, so that um, does not matter where you put the exclamation mark, but this has to identify that this sentence is an exclamatory sentence. So how are you going to change this sentence? So we have I'm going to say Majid. So for exclamatory sentences, you are expressing something, or you are exclaiming. So as we're not going to say that Majid said that. Instead, what's more appropriate is to say that Majid exclaimed. So this exclaimed is the verb we are going to use in an indirect speech when we have an exclamatory sentence in a direct speech. So you have Majid exclaimed. So here, what is Allah's representing? Allah's word, reserved word, is representing a feeling of sadness or feeling of sorrow, because he is sad because he failed the exam. So I'm going to write exclaimed with sorrow because he is sad. So Majid exclaimed with sorrow that he, because I so I is directly linked with Majid and Majid is he. So we are going to say Majid exclaimed with sorrow that he failed. And this sentence is in a past tense. So when you have when you have a reporting speech in a past tense, and a reported speech is also in the past tense, so your past tense gets converted in the past perfect. But if you if that your if the reported speech happened before the reporting speech, but here and also here in the reported speech we don't know the time when he failed, or the time is not mm, uh, the time is not specifically mentioned here. So we'll have to write this sentence as Majid exclaimed with sorrow that he failed. He failed the exam. Or I think the more appropriate one will be Majid exclaimed with sorrow that he had, because the past tense gets converted into past perfect. So you have to write he had failed. He had failed the exam. I actually confused myself which one to use, but here I think if you convert it into past perfect, so I think that will be more appropriate. And in the previous videos I've discussed about the requesting sentences, or in the so in the last the interrogative example, I gave an example. Talha said, where are you going? Where are you going? So here I actually forgot that it's going to be Talha asked. So said is going to be changed into asked. Asked is the verb you're going to use in your indirect speech, because you're asking. You're not saying, you're actually asking. So when you're going to when you're going to narrate this the exact words of Talha into indirect speech, you're going to write Talha asked that where uh, where you were going. So I just wanted to mention that you have to use asked. And if you have please in the reported speech, so you have to use the verb requested. So for example, if you have please shut the door, or please bring a glass of water. So you have to reuse the word. Someone, Mr. X requested, because you have word please, so you're going to use the verb requested um, to have the door shut. So that sentence is going to be like that. And you have ordered when it's not a request, it's just an order. So you're going to say, for example, the master ordered the servant, and something like that. So you're going to use the word ordered, and vice versa. So now let's discuss the fundamentals of story writing. So what is a story? What is a story? So story is a writing material, or writing piece which has some moral, but not necessarily, not every story has a moral. Story is basically a connection of thoughts in a sequential way. So you have a sequential thoughts, which are related with each other, and and a story, a piece of writing which has the same plot, so which has some boundary, and you cannot go are out of that boundary. So what are the fundamentals of story writing? So first you have the setting. So setting involves your environment. Setting involves your environment. The your For example, if that's a story about um, a thirsty crow, so the environment was that he was in a jungle, and there were trees and rocks, and there was a um, there was a pot, and everything you can include in the environment. So environment, you've got to include an environment with your or a setting with your story that matches with the plot, or that matches with the theme of the story. For example, if you're writing a story about a thirsty crow, you've got to include the environment of a jungle. You cannot include the environment of a paradise, or you cannot include the environment of the a wonderland or that kind of stuff. So you have to see the theme first, the theme, and then you have got to select a setting for the story that coordinates or that matches with the plot and the theme of the story. So what is the theme? Theme is a part of the story, or theme is a thing on which around which this whole story revolves. So you have this, or you can say the kind of a summary. I think summary is a separate thing, but you can take it as a summary, or a one line or two lines. So you define theme in a one line, which identifies or which shows that what is this story about. So the whole story revolves around its theme. Next, you have theme, then you have plot. So what is a plot? Plot basically sets boundaries for your story, that your story cannot leave these boundaries, and it's your story has got to remain in the specific boundaries your plot sets. So for example, if you're writing a story about a thirsty crow, you cannot your plot is a thirsty crow, and your plot is no, okay, so let's change it. For example, you're writing a story about Pakistan. So that is a story. So for example, your plot is about Pakistan. Your plot is Pakistan. Your boundary is Pakistan. You cannot escape the boundary of Pakistan. So for example, you cannot include India or Afghanistan or China in your story. Uh, you can do that, but you have to provide a connection between Pakistan and India, and then you're going to jump towards India. But if you do that, instead, or if you do that without providing any connection, that would be considered as a separate story instead of being considered as the same story. So you have got to remain in the boundaries of a plot. Then you have setting, you have theme, you have plot, then you have climax. Climax is basically the turning point, or the most important or the most interesting part of the story, which leads towards the resolution or the conclusion of the story. You can also call it the conflict. You can call it conflict, or you can call it the dilemma dilemma of the story, which is a conflict, or which is the point where the whole on which the the whole the twist comes, or not the twist, the turning point comes, or that leads towards the resolution, or that just gives an idea what is going to happen, or the decision making, or most specifically the decision making part in the story, where the character okay, remembering characters, I almost forgot the characters. So characters are the backbone of a story, because without characters you cannot create a story. So characters are the most important part of the story, and you can include as many characters as you want, but every character is going to have a separate identity. No two characters can be the same. They've got to be some two different characters rather than being the same. So you have characters, you have setting, you have theme, you have plot, you have climax, and these are some of the fundamentals, the fundamental parts of the story writing, which you have to consider before writing a story. And if you understand all of them, you can write a really good story by yourself. So that was it for today's video. I hope you learned something about the direct and indirect speech, and also the fundamentals of story writing. Thank you very much.